In this section of the course, we will discuss the federal, state, and local governance structures and requirements relating to how responders use land mobile radio technologies to support day-to-day operations, planned event, and incident responses. The Federal Communications Commission, or FCC, licenses all radios and radio frequencies utilized by local, state, and federal public safety agencies. Additionally, every radio transmitter used in public safety bands are required to be licensed. The requirements for licensure helps to ensure that problematic equipment and practices do not cause undue interference or other issues with critical communications. The licensure of radio transmitters is typically the responsibility of the manufacturer of the equipment. The licensure of radio frequencies is the responsibility of the individual agency or jurisdiction. For example, the Kenwood radios in use by the Falls County Sheriff's Office received licensure during the manufacturing process. The Falls County Law Enforcement Channel is licensed to Falls County. Together, these licenses allow for the legal use of both the equipment and frequencies by the Sheriff's Office and those agencies and organizations that it allows to use the channel. The National Incident Management System, or NIMS, includes a core set of concepts, principles, and terminology that support incident response and multi-agency coordination. Homeland Security Presidential Directive 5 and Presidential Policy Directive 8 mandate that all agencies and jurisdictions at the local, state, and federal level, as well as tribal governments and private entities with a role in emergency response or management, adopt NIMS as the nation's standardized framework for multidiscipline and multi-agency response. The National Emergency Communications Plan, or NECP, defines 5 strategic goals for response level communications. These goals are to enhance decision making, coordination, and planning for emergency communications through strong governance structures and leadership, to update plans and procedures to improve emergency responder communications and readiness in a dynamic operating environment, to improve responder ability to coordinate and communicate through training and exercise programs that use all available technologies and target gaps in emergency communications, to ensure operational effectiveness through the coordination of emergency communications capabilities, resources, and personnel from across the whole community, and to coordinate research, development, testing, and evaluation activities to develop innovative emergency communications capabilities that support the needs of emergency responders. While NIMS is a comprehensive framework that addresses a wide spectrum of topics, it specifically addresses emergency communications by stating, quote, emergency management and incident response activities rely on communications and information systems that provide a common operating picture to all command and coordination sites. NIMS describes the requirements necessary for a standardized framework for communications and emphasizes the need for a common operating picture. This component is based on the concepts of interoperability, reliability, scalability, and portability, as well as the resiliency and redundancy of communications and information systems. End quote. Operability, as it relates to emergency communications, is the ability for members of an agency, department, or jurisdiction to communicate with one another reliably and efficiently using the technologies available to them. Interoperability, then, is defined as our ability to communicate with those agencies, departments, or jurisdictions outside of our own. Reliability, scalability, portability, resiliency, and redundancy ensure that operability and interoperability can be established and maintained. At the state level, governance structures and requirements relating to emergency communications also exist. The State of Texas Emergency Management Plan outlines the organizations and responsibilities for state-level response to emergencies, disasters, and catastrophic events. The plan contains a number of functional and hazard-specific annexes that support the plan's integration. Of these annexes, Annex B, or the Communications Annex, specifically address emergency communications. The Statewide Communications Interoperability Plan, or SCIP, provides high-level guidance to local agencies and jurisdictions on achieving mission-critical interoperable communications. The SCIP is the state of Texas corollary to the National Emergency Communications Plan. The Texas Statewide Interoperability Channel Plan, or TSICP, addresses the conditions and guidelines for using state-licensed interoperability and mutual aid radio channels. The TSICP requires that each agency or jurisdiction execute the included Memorandum of Understanding in order to be able to use the licensed interoperability channels for low band, VHF, UHF, 700, and 800 MHz bands. The TSICP not only identifies the available statewide interoperability channels for jurisdictions and agencies in Texas, but it also defines the programming requirements for the channels and the intended and allowable uses of each channel. Furthermore, the TSICP outlines the statewide Project 25, or P25, Unit Identification Plan. We will discuss more about P25, unit identification, and how this may affect your agency or jurisdiction later in the course. The Regional Interoperable Communications Plan, or RICP, was first written in 2010 after several years of culminated efforts by agencies and jurisdictions throughout the HOTCOG region. The RICP is our 6-county region's corollary to the Statewide Communications Interoperability Plan, Statewide Interoperable Channel Plan, and the National Emergency Communications Plan. The RICP provides guidance on achieving interoperability between local, state, and federal agencies located throughout the HOTCOG region. The RICP continues to be influenced by the identification of emergency communication issues by local responders and the completion of systemic studies. The RICP and its supporting documents identify system capabilities throughout the region, how these systems are used, and how multi-jurisdictional and multidisciplinary responses are supported through the integration of governance, coordination, training, system design, and planning. The RICP also contains a regional standard operating procedure for agencies that assists in establishing and maintaining interoperability. The RSOP identifies how agencies and jurisdictions throughout the region will utilize interoperability assets, particularly those that are deployable. All agencies and jurisdictions are expected to adhere to the Regional Standard Operating Procedure. Just as the state of Texas has an emergency management plan, so do the cities and counties within Texas. The emergency management plan is adopted by each jurisdiction via signature by the chief elected official. The basic plan outlines the roles, responsibilities, and concept of operations for all emergency management and response-based activities. The basic plan is supported by a number of hazard-specific and functional annexes. Annex B, or the Communications Annex, outlines the roles and responsibilities for conducting emergency communication within the participating jurisdictions. Additionally, Annex B identifies the concept of operations for both operability and interoperability during day-to-day operations, pre-planned events, and incidents of all types and complexities. The city, county, or agency may also have standard operating procedures relating to the use of communications equipment and capabilities. The NECP, SCIP, and the RICP encourage agencies and jurisdictions to establish standard operating procedures that identify how operability and interoperability will be achieved and maintained. Typical consideration of these SOPs include how assets are deployed, the information provided for resource requests and deployment, changing from primary dispatch channels to tactical or interoperability channels, documentation of tactical channel plans for incidents and events, and other such considerations. In summary, we have discussed the federal, state, and local guidance and governance structures that influence emergency communications within the Heart of Texas region. Additionally, we discussed how the National Emergency Communications Plan, the Statewide Communications Interoperability Plan, and the Regional Interoperable Communications Plan are integrated to ensure cohesion and the promotion of interoperability. After watching this video, please complete the activities below in order to unlock the next unit of instruction. You can also use the resources referenced below to access the various documents discussed in this unit of instruction. We'll see you in Unit 2, and until then, stay safe, be aware, and keep up the great work that you do in your community.